Hi, ladies and gentlemen. I promised this for first period because unfortunately they didn't get the option to listen to me give the notes. So this is for you guys. All right, so we were working on the middle and southern colonies today, the economic and cultural expansion. Essentially, the question is, how does geography shape settlement patterns? Well, if I'm a farmer, I'm not going to move to the New England colonies. Why not? Because the New England colonies are cold, they have rocky soil, they have a very long winter, and it doesn't really invite me as a farmer because it's not conducive to farming. However, in the middle and southern colonies, on the other hand, that is quite a different story. The middle colonies are going to provide a warmer environment, a more culturally diverse group of people, and religious freedom that had not been offered before. All right, so let's go over geography. Every colony had access to the coast in the middle colonies. The weather is mild winters, warm summers, moderate growing season. They have fertile soil that's good for farming. They have large forests, good rivers, natural harbors, and of course, they're going to discover iron ore and begin mining it in the mountains. The middle colony's economy is based off of grain. They are known as the breadbasket colonies simply because they grow the grain that makes bread: wheat, rye, barley, oats, corn, because all of those things make bread. You grind it down to a flour, and boom, there you go. You can make a bread. They also have what are known as grist mills. And grist mills is the process where they smash the grain up into powdery flakes so that they can be used. And of course, this is going to grow up along the region's many rivers because they'll use water power in order to get the flour, grind it down. They also, of course, have timber, iron, and furs. They're going to cut down trees and they're going to sell them to England, who has run out of trees. They're going to mine for iron, and of course, they're going to kill animals for their fur. They have two natural harbors, that is New York City and Philadelphia. They are located right off of the Hudson River in this area here. So you'll find New York here, and then you'll find the Philadelphia off of the river, the Delaware River, up in this region. The middle colonies will originally be, well, let's start with New York. New York is originally colonized by the Dutch in 1624. The Dutch will plant themselves in what is Manhattan today and the New York City area. However, the more powerful and self-important English are going to come along after the King of England gives the Duke of York the proprietary or royal colony of New York. The Hudson River is an excellent place for trade. He knows that after having scouts sent out, and he and his men will go out and they will claim the land for him in 1664. So the English are going to take over. As I said, it was a proprietary colony. It means it was a gift to the Duke of York. He will rename it to New York, and it will become a very diverse population. You have the Swedish, the Dutch, the Prussians, the Native Americans, and Africans. And I say Prussians because Germany did not exist yet. You will also have the first Jewish Americans in Jewish people in the Americas. And it will become one of the fastest growing places in the colonies. New Jersey, originally founded by the English again in 1638. Trenton will be founded, and that's the first city. The Duke of York is going to give the land to Lord Berkeley and Sir Carteret. Again, it's a proprietary colony. They're going to change the name to New Jersey. They will sell the land and become quite rich off of it. They will offer freedom of religion, trial by jury, and representative assembly. This means that they will vote in for representatives, and this will be like a mini Congress. And again, New Jersey will become an ethnically diverse environment. As you'll notice, when we talk about the middle colonies, diverse is a word that we use often to show that they are different cultures. Delaware will be established in 1638, originally by the Swedish. The Swedes will settle Wilmington, Delaware. It's not Delaware yet, although that is what the Native Americans called it. The Swedish trading post we'll have the first log cabins here in the colonies. It will become quite the lucrative business for the Swedes. However, again, in 1682, the English are going to claim the land and take it over. William Penn, who controlled part of Delaware, will allow Delaware to have their own legislature and work as a separate colony. However, they were still under Pennsylvania's authority of the governor. Now, Pennsylvania, the biggest and the best. Um, I say that simply because Pennsylvania is the hub for Quakers, cultural diversity, abolitionists, people who fight against slavery, and a very integrated society. In 1682, the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia, is founded. King Charles II is going to give William Penn the land in payment for a debt he owed William Penn's father, as a matter of fact, because his father had given King Charles II money to fight in, well, war. And rather than pay William Penn with gold, he gave William Penn the land, which William Penn was only too happy to take because his fellow Quakers, which was a religious group called the Society of Friends, were mistreated and persecuted in England. So this gave the Quakers a safe haven to live in. These people were pacifists, meaning that um, they did not believe in violence, and everyone is equal. He welcomed different religions and nationalities and treated the Native Americans fairly. This is very different from the majority of the other colonies. The Native Americans, while William Penn was in charge of Pennsylvania, the Native Americans were treated very well. They did not believe in slavery, and in fact, will fight against it because, as pacifists, they believed that slavery in all its violence was against God's teachings. And of course, they, in their own time, the first civil rights advocates, were a big believer in everyone was equal, everyone was the same in the eyes of the God. Unfortunately, after William Penn dies, many things will change in Pennsylvania. But one thing that does not is the use of slaves in the colony. Now, the southern colonies, as we know just from our own experience living in the South, is going to be very different. They include the colonies of Virginia, Georgia, North South Carolina, and Maryland. It is much warmer in this region. They have very mild winters. Their long growing season, because it stays warm in these regions in this region for so long, it allows them to grow a lot longer. They have fertile soil, which is good for farming, large forests and hills. They have excellent rivers and natural harbors, and an area known as the Tidewater region. And this is an area that has flat, low-lying plains along the coast and has some of the best places to grow things like rice and indigo. And of course, it also has a section called the Back Country region, which is essentially the Appalachian Mountains. The climate and terrain of the southern colonies is ideal for growing cash crops. And just a reminder, cash crops are crops that are grown specifically for sale. They're not keeping these for themselves, they're going to sell it. They have plentiful rivers, which will provide easy transport for the cash crops from plantations that are slightly interior to get themselves down to the ocean. And the cash crops include tobacco, rice, cotton, and indigo. Now, keeping in mind that the ones I just mentioned are labor intensive crops. And what this means is they require a lot of attention. They require people to constantly be looking at them, constantly going through and checking for diseases, for bugs. And then, of course, when it comes time to pick them, it requires a lot of people. This is the area what you're looking at. The bottom left-hand side, this would be tobacco. The upper section here would be a rice field. And then, of course, you have cotton, which will come later. The southern economy in the Tidewater region developed what we call the plantation system and the planter class. This had rich elite who will control politics and the economy of the area. The planters originally used indentured servants, but indentured servants run away. They know the language, they know where they can run, and they know where they can hide. And they can hide within the other areas. So eventually they'll forget about the indentured servants and they'll turn to African slaves, mainly because African slaves will not run away. They will, because they're in a foreign land, they don't know the language, they have nowhere to go. So slavery will become very popular in the South. Plantations were self sufficient, meaning they didn't have to go anywhere. They didn't rely on stores. They didn't rely on merchants for goods. They did all of this on their own. So, this will lead to the development of very few large cities in the South. And the large cities that we do have in the South will not start cropping up until after the Civil War. The backcountry region were settlers who were new to the colonies, usually Scots Irish. Um, they didn't want to be part of the big areas closest to the ocean. Not only that, they didn't have the money to buy the land. They were mostly small family farms. They would grow corn, some tobacco. If they were lucky, they had one or two slaves at the most. Most of them did not have any. And I say if they were lucky, not because they were lucky to have slaves, but it meant that they had a little more money. They outnumbered the Tidewater plantation owners. Virginia, of course, is founded in 1607, Jamestown being the first through a royal charter. Their goal was to trade for profit and gold, or excuse me, for trade and profit. They were trying to find gold. They are the first permanent American colony. And of course, John Rolfe will come up with tobacco with a blend of West Indies, which was the Caribbean, as well as Native American from Virginia tobacco and mixing them together. And the English absolutely love it. They will also start the slave trade in 1619 in Virginia. And of course, created the first representative assembly, the House of Burgesses. And this is essentially going to be like our first Congress in Virginia. Which leads us then to Maryland, established in 1634 by Lord Baltimore. Baltimore is one of their main cities even today. Lord Baltimore was a Catholic. He practiced freely, but that was because he was rich and he was a lord. However, he recognized that his fellow Catholics were not given the same rights, and he wanted a place for them so that they could practice their religion without being arrested and thrown in jail. It was a safe place for them. He will pass what is known as the Maryland Toleration Act, which allowed for religious freedom and toleration. But let's be clear, he really passed that law specifically for Catholics. They, of course, planted tobacco like most of the other region and corn. The law was every person planting tobacco shall tend 2 acres of corn because it was with the clear understanding that people needed to eat as well as it was good for the soil. Plantations grew, bringing slaves and, of course, more indentured servants. And this will become the Mason-Dixon line. It is the boundary between Maryland and Pennsylvania. So if you're looking at the map on the bottom right-hand side here, this becomes the Mason-Dixon line, and it will be used through the Civil War. The Carolinas, North and South. Carolina, it means Charles Land in Latin. It was the first city founded was Charlestown, which will later become Charleston. There are 8 proprietors that created the proprietary colony. This means there are 8 people in charge to begin with. It was for profit. The Northern Territory was settled by Virginia farmers who grew tobacco, sold forest products such as timber and tar. The Southern was more prosperous. This was the Charleston Harbor. They grew rice, developed indigo dye for textiles, used slaves, and they split in 1670, becoming 2 royal colonies by 1729. And then we come to Georgia. Established in 1733, the first city founded is going to be Savannah by a man named James Oglethorpe. Now, he had an interesting plan. Georgia is actually created for debtors. And what that means is back in the day, if you owed money and you couldn't pay your bills, they put you in debtor's prison. And James Oglethorpe is like, you know what? This is a drain on our society. We can't have these debtors' prisons. We need to come up with an alternative plan because our prisons are becoming overcrowded because people can't pay their bills. So the plan was to offer these people an opportunity to go to Georgia and settle Georgia for the English, thereby alleviating the prisons. And then those people could then start living their lives, making money, and if they owed money, they could pay it back. The other reason for this is because we needed what the English called a buffer. And that means protection for South Carolina, which was extremely lucrative in their profits for the English. So send the debtors, the people who are supposed to be in prison, to Georgia. And that way, if the Spanish ever attack from Florida, they would have to go through the debtors first. So if you look down here on the map, if they attacked from Florida, they would have to go through Georgians before they could get to South Carolina, and that would give South Carolina plenty of time to get their stuff together. He wanted sober, industrial, and people of high standing morals. They were given religious freedom, everyone except the Catholics. They banned slavery and rum, and it was given back to the king in 1751 and founded 50 years after the other 12 were founded. And you guys can watch the videos on your own if you would like. I've attached the notes to your page. So these are the 13 colonies. New England is New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. Middle colonies include New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. The southern colonies include Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask, and we will go from there. You guys have a good night.